This is Patchwork Heart Ministries Young Catholics Respond, brought to you by Viva Guadalupe. Now, here's your host, Bill Snyder.
In 3, 2, and 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Young Catholics Respond here on Patchwork Heart Radio. My name is Bill Snyder. I'm your host, and today I could not be more delighted to be joined by Susan Tassone. She is a passionate champion for the holy souls in Purgatory and is recognized as leading the Purgatory movement in the United States. She is a best-selling author whose first work, The Way of the Cross for the Holy Souls in Purgatory, has sold more than 75,000 copies. In addition to her many writings on behalf of those in Purgatory, she is a popular speaker and frequent guest on radio and TV shows. Susan holds her master's degree in religious education from Loyola University and has had the honor and privilege of being granted 2 private audiences with Saint Pope John Paul II, who bestowed a special blessing upon her ministry for the holy souls. Welcome, Susan, to the program, and thank you so much for spending some of your very busy time this year with me.
Good morning. Yes, Bill. This is the time of year that we are going to be kicking off November 1st. The whole month of November is dedicated to praying for our deceased loved ones. So it's a great honor to talk to you at this time of year.
Yes, it is. And as I mentioned to you off the air, our radio program airs to a wide Christian audience, and many people may not understand the doctrine of purgatory, and there are 5 truths about purgatory that we kind of want to go through. Will you talk to us about the truths of purgatory? Because for Christians who might not necessarily believe in the doctrine.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this teaching is based really on the practice of prayer for the dead that's already mentioned in Scripture, Bill. The famous passage in Maccabees, therefore Judas, quote, Maccabees, made atonement for the dead that they might be delivered from their sin. So prayer for the deceased clearly implies that there's a purgatory of some kind. The scriptures speak of a cleansing fire after death. Corinthians 1:3-15, Peter, Matthew 12:32. In fact, it wasn't until the 16th century Protestant revolt against the church that any significant opposition to prayers for the dead occurred. As I said, as faithful Jews, Jesus and the apostles joined in prayers for the deceased. St. Clement said that St. Peter liked to have prayers said for the relief of those who had passed away. St. Paul implies the existence of purgatory in his prayer for it's a long name, Onesiphorus. And he said this in Timothy: "May the Lord grant him to find mercy from the may the Lord grant him to find mercy from the Lord on that day." That's equivalent to the invocation to the Lord, grant eternal rest to the faithful. And around 190, there was a document called the Passion of Perpetua and Felicity. They were martyrs of the early church, and they described St. Perpetua's vision regarding her deceased brother who was in pain. And she, quote, prayed for him night and day, wailing and crying that her prayers be granted. And then several days later, Perpetua learned of the end of his pain and his peace with God. So even from the earliest days, the inscriptions in the catacombs of Rome testify to prayer for the dead with words and petitions for peace and rest. Then you've got the 3rd century theologian Tertullian. He tells us of the faithful prayers at the tombs and to make intercession for the departed. The church fathers, those are the renowned figures of the early church, speak of the same words of faith and conviction regarding purgatory and make the same moving appeal to pray for them. Ephraim, he stressed the value of prayers. Cyril of Jerusalem, expressed, his prayer. Ambrose offered a touching prayer for the Roman Empress Theodosius. God's justice demands expiation. We can go on to St. Clement, the Pope. So from that, the Church formulated her doctrine on purgatory at the Council of Trent and stressed the value of prayer for the dead. And then in our catechism, we say all who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are assured of their salvation, but after death they undergo a purification, so to achieve the holiness necessary to enter into heaven, because you have to be all pure and all holy to stand before God. So that's the truth about purgatory's existence. Why it exists? Why do we have purgatory? Because it's God's mercy, because He's incomprehensibly holy, Bill. So purgatory is the masterpiece of His mercy. It's a healing in a loving purgatory. It's His love that cleanses and purifies us, so we can stand before Him, because He's a God of unspeakable purity. But because of our sin and our selfishness, we need purification. And if we didn't do that here on earth, He gives us this place of getting ready to stand before Him.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So then we hear a lot about praying for the dead. You mentioned it, that Scripture requires us to do so, that early church fathers require us to do so. Why is it important then to pray for those who have passed away, who are in purgatory?
Because they suffer, and what their greatest suffering is, Bill, is the loss of the sight of God. And once the soul leaves the body, the time of merit ends. And so you're either totally pure to stand before God, or you still have this residual effect, these stains, these bad habits, these attitudes that have to be purified. So the key thing is that after death, we believe that they can no longer gain merit. Either they're going to pay a debt, to healing and purifying their soul to stand before God, or they, the saints, go directly to heaven. Saint Teresa of Avila, Pope St. John Paul, very holy, or you hopefully not, go to hell. Once the soul sees God, even for a brief moment, the eyes of the soul can't close without being in inexpressible pain, because they realize what they've done. They know where they stand. They see the beauty and lovableness of God and how good God was to them, and the plan that God had for them, and how they said yes and no. And they see how providence is designed, and it cries out, God, God, I must be with God. They choose to go. It's like going to a party. If you're not ready, do you go in your work clothes? No, you want to be prepared. So this work of purgatory is a preparation. It's not a punishment. It's only a punishment in the sense that it'll be spiritually and psychologically demanding, as the acquisition of any virtues are. And these are the theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. I call them the soul virtues. And these are the means that prepare us here on earth for a life with Jesus. So heaven is looking for Christ-like people. That's what God will be looking for. And if at the time of our death these qualities are deficient in us, with God's help, we'll be able to purge these remnants of selfishness and of self-centeredness from our soul through this purifying process. Simply put, Bill, it's a labor of love. Anything worthwhile requires pain to make progress, but it's pain with a reward. So purification is hard. We have to rid our souls of these stains of sin. That's analogous to like losing weight, or we're trying to stop smoking. There's pain, and as we struggle to achieve our goal, it's a sign of progress. So it means that we're on the road to where we eventually want to be, and it makes it a joyful pain. Too strong an emphasis on purgatory as a punishment is the wrong way to look at it, Bill. God isn't trying to get even with people. It's not a chamber of horrors. It's out of His infinite love for us that He's preparing His unprepared children for the joys of heaven. We're all given a mission in life, Bill. We were charged by the gospel to prepare for heaven while we're here. There were countless times God gives us these graces that help us get ready. But if we fail to use those graces while on earth, whose fault is that? But God doesn't regard our failures as final. He comes to complete the work we've left undone. He doesn't say, you failed me completely. We need to see that purgatory is a place where shallowness and selfishness are overcome. It's a place of spiritual growth and maturing to be able to stand before him.
How beautiful is that? You're listening to the voice of Susan Tassone. She is pretty much the authority out there on purgatory. And we're talking today about purgatory because this program is actually airing on the eve of All Saints' Day for the first time, and then we'll air on All Souls' Day and once more on Saturday here. So one of the things that we are just touching base on here, Susan, is this whole idea of, and I think you did a really great job of highlighting it for us. This whole idea of, almost what we heard this past Sunday in the gospel reading, giving to what God is due to God and giving what to Caesar is due to Caesar in some aspects, right? When we have that opportunity on earth and we don't pay it, and we don't show our devotion completely to God, and we show up,
or we don't fulfill our mission.
Right, or you don't fulfill the mission that God put on your heart, then there's nothing but purgatory, right, for you to save you because of this mercy, because of this incredible mercy of God, so let's talk about the best way to help those who are in purgatory, because you mentioned at the very beginning we are to pray for the dead. So what is the best way we can help those? Because I'm sure some of my loved ones have experienced the pains of purgatory that have gone before me here. So what is the best way for us to help our loved ones who maybe are suffering suffering in purgatory?
Yeah, that purifying process is, like I said, remember that's just so we understand the primary pain of what the soul suffers is the loss of the sight of God. Once the soul sees God, even for a brief moment, Bill, the eyes of the soul can never close without inexpressible pain of longing for God. They cry out, God, God, I must be with God, because they see God and they see the glory and the lovableness and the beauty of God. And there's no rebellion in purgatory. They know, they choose, they see they're not ready, and they turn and hurl themselves into that purifying process because they don't want to, spend 1 second in heaven if they're not ready. They don't want that. They would rather spend, 10 years in purgatory than go before God 1 moment sooner. And so this pain is a spiritual fever. I just want to clarify all this. It's a burning love for God. So that's what they experience. They can't help themselves. The time of merit is up, and so they burn for God. It's a heart sickness. It's a frustrated love. They have this unquenchable thirst and unspeakable yearning for Him, because He's the fulfillment of all our desires. So the ways that we can help them, help our loved ones, first and foremost, is the Mass. The Mass is the highest form of worship. It's the highest act of prayer. Have a Mass offered for them. Either have one offered, or either attend Mass and offer your communion, offer your indulgence for them. We have Gregorian Masses. Those are a tradition that was popularized by Pope St. Gregory the Great. One of the monks in his monastery died, Justice, and he ordered 30 masses for the soul of Justice. And after the 30 masses, they're actually called Gregorian Masses. Put them in your will. After the 30th Mass, Justice appeared to Pope St. Gregory and said he was released from purgatory. Now, does that guarantee I do this and I'm going to get released? No, the Church doesn't say that. The Church is only pointing to the power and the efficacy of the Mass. So have Masses offered, or have Gregorian Masses offered, or attend Mass. is the first and foremost. And alongside the Mass is the Rosary. Rosary is actually called the dry Mass because during that Protestant revolt, the priest wasn't able to offer Mass, so he sent the people home and told them to recite the Rosary. And the Rosary became known as the dry Mass. The Rosary is the most powerful mirroring weapon on earth. Pope St. John Paul, Benedict, Francis, alongside the Mass is the weapon, is the Rosary. Why? Because God has sent Our Lady to many apparition sites telling us, Fatima, we're celebrating 100 years of Fatima. What did she say? Pray the Rosary every day. Anybody can pray the Rosary. You don't have to be Catholic to pray the Rosary. She said it would stop the war, and not enough people did, and we ended up in World War II. The Rosary is very powerful for the souls because of the indulgences that are attached to them. The Stations of the Cross, again, are very powerful. Pope John Paul prayed those stations every Friday. And why are they important for the souls? Because, again, of the indulgences that are attached to them. Eucharistic adoration is very powerful to offer offer that for the souls in purgatory. I call them the pillars that help relieve and release them. So that, and pray for the most abandoned souls. And you know who they are, Bill? The most abandoned souls are those people that don't believe in the doctrine of purgatory. So they suffer because no one prays for them, family members don't believe, many Catholics don't believe in the doctrine. It's a part of our faith, and so they get left off and suffer, and so we need to pray for those people. And let's say they're already in heaven, who we don't know, we're not the judge, only God is. So let's say those souls are already in heaven. What happens to those prayers, Bill? St. Thomas Aquinas calls it accidental glory. If that soul is in heaven and you continue to offer masses in your prayers, that soul, and this is in the Catechism, number 958, that soul gets two things, Bill. It gets, it's called accidental glory. It gets an increase in its intimacy with God, and it gets an increase in its intercessory power. So the lesson is never stop praying for your dead.
Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Susan, I have to take a short commercial break here on Young Catholics Respond, but I want to come back and talk with you about your latest endeavor, the Faustina Prayer Book for the Conversion of Sinners, which I think will be of interest to many, many people out there because you're such a prolific and incredible author. So I want to just take a short break, and we'll be right back here on Patchwork Heart Radio. It's radio for the Catholic Heart.
For nearly 500 years, the people of Mexico have taken advantage of a promise made by the Queen of Heaven. In the year 1531, Our Lady appeared to a humble Aztec Indian and revealed herself to be the mother of the one true God. Telling Saint Juan Diego that she desired a temple to be built in her honor, she promised that she would help all those who appealed to her motherly love and protection. To seal this promise, our Blessed Mother left an image of herself that has been miraculously preserved and can be seen by all who visit the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. Our Lady is not a liar. For nearly 5 centuries, millions of people from throughout Mexico have made pilgrimages to the shrine, either seeking Our Lady's help or thanking her for a petition granted. Today, more than ever, she is ready to help you or any of her children who seek her assistance. To learn more about how you can visit this remarkable shrine and bring your own petitions to our Blessed Mother, please visit vivaguadalupe.org. Do you want to keep your finger on the pulse of Patchwork Heart Ministry? Follow our monthly blog, Written on Our Hearts. Simply go to patchworkheartministry.blogspot.com and click subscribe, and follow the on-screen instructions. That's patchworkheartministry.blogspot.com, then click subscribe. Now back to Young Catholics Respond. Once again, Bill Snyder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this episode of Young Catholics Respond. I'm Bill Snyder. Today, my guest is Susan Tassone, the champion for the Holy Souls in Purgatory. She is just an incredible person. We were talking all about the doctrine of purgatory and the amazing, just the amazing amount of God's mercy that He has for us. And the truth of purgatory. But I want to turn to you, Susan, and talk about your latest project, and latest book out, Saint Faustina Prayer, book for the conversion of sinners. And can you talk with us about this book and why you spotlight Saint Faustina's prayers for the conversion of sinners? Why?
Yeah, Bill, that was a good question, because being the Purgatory lady, what was the connection? And I always, I like to, I need to have a connection with Purgatory, or I'm not. It's just important to me in what I'm called to do. But I discovered St. Faustina's diary in the early '80s, and before she was even a household name. St. John Paul II. She was the first saint canonized in 2000, and she fascinated me. It was just interesting about how she became holy. How did she avoid purgatory? And this is a fascinating thing I discovered. E.W. Chan told me, that's the Catholic Global Network, largest Catholic global network in the world. They told me that the number one most requested prayer they receive worldwide are for conversions, Bill. This worldwide, they get calls from all over the world every day, and that was their most requested prayer. From people. They wanted conversions for their families, for their loved ones, for their friends, and children calling in for the conversion of their parents.
Wow.
This was also true, I discovered, as I've been on the road, because the book came out last spring, and it's already sold 10,000 copies. It was also true for Catholic radio stations, Catholic newspapers. There was no resource that they could give people on what to do and how to pray for conversions. And so now we have the book. And again, it was a point that it was a huge issue. Radio stations and newspapers got the same calls, number one most requested for prayers. So now we have a prayer book for the conversion of sinners. And I was very surprised at how often St. Faustina wrote about conversion. Chapter after chapter, her diary spoke of Jesus' call for the conversion of sinners. So, what does purgatory have to do with conversion? Well, we have to convert in order to avoid purgatory. What's the chief way to avoid purgatory? Doing the will of God in all things in the present moment. And so Faustina said that this is the secret of sanctity, and this is what led her and all the saints to holiness, was doing God's will in the present moment. So the book was a perfect match. It's for our own conversion, for loved ones. There's guidance, there's teachings, there's valuable insights, there's practical examples to show you how to place the lives of all your loved ones and your friends into God's merciful hands.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I'm assuming, Susan, that, a lot of people out there who maybe pray for conversion for people, their family and whatnot, and even others in the world, maybe just do so from their heart. But what is the benefit of praying a scripted prayer? Why pray, a formula scripted prayer for conversion versus just, offering the thoughts of your own heart to God for the conversion of those people?
Yes, Bill. They're both important. To pray from your heart, because God looks at your heart. So that is not excluded. That's very important. We need to pray from our heart, but we also need to pray certain prayers, because what I found, it's very, prayer is absolutely critical. It's very important. Jesus demands prayer and sacrifice, and he instructed Faustina to pray certain kinds of prayers for the conversion of sinners. It comes directly from him, and he told her and us what he wanted us to pray. And there were a couple things. He told her and us to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet for sinners and for the dying, and Faustina did it. He also asked her to make a special novena for the conversion of the whole world. Now, this is in the book, and she did that too. We have that novena in the book, and that's the novena that we start on Good Friday and it ends on Mercy Sunday, where Jesus tells her to pray for certain groups of people, and it literally covers the whole world, asking for mercy. The diary also tells us that he said to her, "There's more merit to 1 hour of meditation on my sorrowful passion than a whole year of flagellation that draws my blood. So his wounds are of an infinite value. He told her and us to contemplate his wounds. He said that this is of great value to us and it brings him great joy. Needless to say, she did it. Longinus, the Roman that pierced our Lord's side, and the blood, flowed from his wound, from his heart, his side. And what happened was people don't know that Longinus had, I think, could not see out of one of his eyes. And the blood, when he pierced our Lord, the blood splattered on his eyes, and his eye was healed. So we have all the meditations on his passion. I call it the Triduum of Conversion, where we have all his wounds, his passion, her meditations, and for us to do that because it pleases him and it helps with the conversion of sinners. He also gave her a special prayer to pray, Bill, and he promised that anyone who prays this prayer faithfully and fervently and from your heart, he promises the grace of the conversion of that soul. And the prayer is this: O blood and water which gush forth from the heart of Jesus as a fount of mercy for us, I trust in you. He says anyone that prays this prayer, that soul will get the grace of conversion.
How beautiful. How incredible is that? I want to maybe close with this. Time always runs short when in our conversations, and because there's just so much stuff packed into them. But I want to just talk with you about our own conversion, looking in our own heart. It's easy to look at somebody else and say, oh yeah, that person really needs conversion. But how about us? How about,
Yes.
What about us?
We may say that I don't need conversion. I go to mass, I say my rosary, I go to confession. How do you respond to that? I'm good. Well, how do we know if we're converting? Well, there was a woman that took great pride in telling her confessor that she was reading the mystics, John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, and she was making great strides. But in confession, she was ready to go to confession, but she had nothing to say to him. She goes, I'm good, Well, how could that be if she was growing closer to the Lord and not see more deeply her own failures to love? If we can't tell ourselves our faults and what we need to work on, then we need to pray harder and we need to look more carefully because we all have flaws. And so what's the clue? What's the clue if you're converting? The clue is this. Are you, prayer should lead you into the virtues. So are you more merciful? Are you more generous? Are you more kind? Are you more loving? If those are the fruit of your prayers, then you can say if you're converting. But if you walk out of mass or services and you start yelling at the guy in the parking lot, the prayer wasn't fruitful. So that's the clue. There's always a link, to conversion between your actions and your prayers. And if your prayer is not, helping you to become, more loving and more forgiving and more kind, then the prayer is not working and you're not converting. It's the behavior.
Beautiful. Susan, it is always an amazing conversation when I talk with you. Thank you so much for your precious, precious time this time of year.
Thank you, Bill, and thank your listeners. And remember, pray for the deceased the month of November, because most souls are not released on All Souls Day. Most souls are released at Christmas. So we want to give them paradise for Christmas.
Absolutely. Absolutely we do. So, Susan, thank you once again. Real quick, it is susantassone.com, right? That's your website? Very easy to find?
Yes.
Just go to susantassone.com. Again, the St. Faustina prayer book for the conversion of sinners as well. You can just type that in Amazon or Google, and it'll come up as well. So, Susan, thank you once again. This has been an episode of Young Catholics Respond here on Patchwork Heart Radio. Until next time, from all of us here at Patchwork Heart Ministry, I'm Bill Snyder. Keep beating to your Catholic heart.
This has been an episode of Young Catholics Respond. For more information about this program or Patchwork Heart Ministry, visit patchworkheart.org. That's patchworkheart.org. Or email info@patchworkheart.org.